Bitcoin. It kind of feels like digital magic, doesn't it? This currency that was just created out of thin air by a super mysterious figure we only know as Satoshi Nakamoto. But behind that digital curtain, there's this incredibly competitive, high-stakes world that's all about raw computing power and some relentless economics. It's a full-on technological arms race, and today, we're going to break down who's actually winning.
So it really all boils down to this one central question, right? How do you get rich mining a currency you can't even hold in your hand? Well, to answer that, we have to understand the engine that powers the entire Bitcoin network, a process called mining.
You see, when Satoshi Nakamoto first launched Bitcoin back in 2009, the whole system was designed to be like a digital gold rush. But what's really important to get is that miners aren't just magically creating money. They're actually doing something way, way more important for the health of the entire network.
Okay, so every single time someone sends or receives Bitcoin, that transaction has to be verified and secured. And that's the real job of a miner. They grab a whole bunch of these transactions, bundle them together, and then do all the computational heavy lifting to add them to this massive, public, permanent record called the blockchain. For doing all that crucial work, the network rewards them with brand new Bitcoins.
But wait, how does the network decide who gets that juicy reward? Well, it basically throws all the miners in the world into this giant competition to be the very first one to solve an incredibly difficult puzzle. And it's not really about being a math genius. It's all about having raw, brute force processing power. This entire system is called proof of work.
The best way to think about it is like a global lottery that goes off every 10 minutes. All these miners' computers are just trying to guess a specific winning number over and over. And I mean, they're making trillions of guesses per second. The first one to land on that number gets to create what's called a hash. You can think of it like a unique digital fingerprint for that new block of transactions. The research paper we're looking at calls this an extremely rare event. Find that hash first, and boom, you win the prize.
And here's a quick rundown of how that race actually plays out. First, all the new transactions get announced to everyone on the network. The miners then scoop them up into a block, and immediately, that high-speed guessing game begins. As soon as there's a winner, they broadcast their solution out to everybody else. The rest of the network quickly checks their work, adds the new block to the chain, and the winner gets their Bitcoin reward. And then, the whole race just starts right back up again.
So you can imagine, right? This constant, non-stop, high-stakes competition created this huge economic incentive. You have to guess faster than everyone else. And that single incentive kicked off a massive technological arms race that turned mining from a basement hobby into a multi-billion-dollar global industry.
The evolution of the hardware happened at a genuinely breathtaking pace. I mean, back in 2009, a regular CPU in your home computer was totally fine. By 2010, miners figured out that graphics cards, or GPUs, were way faster. Then came the first pieces of specialized hardware, FPGAs. But by 2013, the game was changed forever by these things called ASICs. These were custom-built chips that did one thing, and one thing only: mine Bitcoin at absolutely blinding speeds.
Now this is where it gets super interesting, because these two graphs right here, they pretty much tell the whole story. The graph on the left shows the total network hash rate. That's the total guessing power of the entire network just exploding upwards. But now look at the graph on the right. At the exact same time, the amount of energy it cost for each one of those guesses was plummeting. The race wasn't just about more raw power, it was about more efficient power.
And this chart just lays out the core economic trade-off perfectly. A GPU could do millions of guesses or hashes per second. An ASIC could do billions, and it did it while using way less electricity. So yeah, they were a massive investment up front, but their efficiency was so insane that they made every other piece of hardware totally obsolete, practically overnight.
Okay, so we've got this incredibly complex economic arms race going on. But how in the world do you actually study it? Well, to really understand the forces at play, a research team from the University of Caglia did something fascinating. They built a digital replica of the entire Bitcoin market.
They created what's called an agent-based model. And you can almost think of it like a financial sim city or a digital twin of the economy. They built this virtual world and then populated it with thousands of simulated agents, each one programmed to act like a real-world person in the Bitcoin ecosystem. This let them run all sorts of experiments to see who really comes out on top.
So there were three main types of players living in this virtual market. First, you have the miner. Their goal is to create wealth by buying hardware and literally turning electricity into new coins. Then there's the random trader, who kind of represents everyday people using Bitcoin for practical reasons, not to get rich. And finally, you have the chartist, your classic speculator, just trying to profit from the market swings by buying low and selling high.
So you've got these two totally different strategies operating in the exact same market. The miner is playing a long-term game of production, investing in physical stuff to create new value. The chartist, on the other hand, is playing a short-term game of prediction, trying to capture value that's already there by outsmarting everyone else. So, in this little virtual world, who wins?
All right, and this is where it gets really good. After running their simulation 100 times, just to make sure the results weren't a fluke, the model started to reveal some incredibly clear patterns about the winners and losers in this whole Bitcoin economy. First up, let's look at the price in their simulation. You can see it almost always trended upwards. Now, that's a little different from the real world's wild roller coaster ride, right? And that's because, as the researchers point out, their model can't really account for sudden external shocks, like a big exchange getting hacked. What it shows us is the underlying economic pressure in a pure, totally predictable system.
And within that pure system, the researchers' conclusion was, well, unambiguous. I'm going to quote them directly here. Miners are clearly the winners, thanks to their ability to mine new Bitcoins. It makes sense. While everyone else was just trading the existing coins back and forth, the miners had a direct tap into the source.
And wow, this graph right here says it all. This is the proof. It's tracking the average wealth for each of the three groups. Just look at the miner's wealth. That's the dashed black line. You can see how it just completely separates from the pack and climbs steadily up and up, leaving the speculators and the regular users way, way behind. Being able to create the asset from scratch was the ultimate economic advantage.
Okay, so we know miners as a group came out on top. But within that winning group, was it just a simple case of whoever spends the most wins the most? Was the secret to success just buying the biggest, baddest mining rig you could find?
Well, what's so fascinating is that the answer was no, not at all. The simulation found no real connection between how successful an individual miner was and how aggressively they spent their money on new hardware. In fact, some of the wealthiest miners in the simulation were actually pretty conservative with their spending. Turns out, just throwing money at the problem was not the secret sauce.
Which leaves us with this final, really provocative question. This entire system is an arms race, where the puzzle is designed to get harder over time. So in a race like that, what's the real key to long-term survival? Is it just about having the most raw brute force power? Or is it that relentless pursuit of efficiency, of getting more and more hashes for every single watt of power you use? The answer to that question is probably going to define the next era of Bitcoin.